The Instructor podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Just talk to me about that. Let's dive straight into that. The transition from becoming an instructor to becoming a coach, and maybe what you think the difference is.
Well, probably the first thing to say about it was a little bit forced. It's at the beginning. It was like, you have to do this now. After going through the old style check tests, as they were called, and getting top grades on there, when they decided, they being the DVSA, decided that everything was going to happen differently, I sort of didn't take any notice of it for probably about, ever. And then I had my first standards check, and I did a lesson, and it was really good, and my learner was really happy. And the examiner came back out and said, "You failed." And I was just in shock. So it was like the whole transition kind of passed me by. I was doing my own thing, that I thought it was and it was rubbish, and it wasn't what they wanted anymore. So my first steps into coaching and being client-centered were because of sheer panic and fear of failing 2 more times and losing my job that I love. So that was the initial thing into it. But the more I got into it, the more I, trained for it, and the more research I did on coaching and client-centered learning, just the more massively beneficial it was to learners. And so many different problems that I used to have just never happen now. It's just a wonderful thing that everyone should embrace, not just a few.
When you say the problems that used to happen but don't happen now, what can you give me an example of some? Because Again, I'm someone that's embracing coaching, but someone that's maybe a bit more hesitant.
My way was great. My instructional ability was wonderful, in the opinion of me, and I did it my way. And because it worked, I had a really good pass rate. I think at one point, 2014, I had like 28 passes in a row, like over a year, like undefeated for a year, the invincible year of 2014. And everything was going really good. But occasionally I'd get learners that it just didn't work with, and I'd always put that down to them. It was always them. They didn't like the way I did things. So see you later. Go and find someone else then. And that used to happen, not all the time. It was a minority of situations where that happened. But it did happen. And I feel now as a coach where it's very much, I'm going to be flexible about how you learn and how you like to do lessons. I've never had that problem since. I've never had someone that I can't work with.
Am I right in thinking that I'm sure you told me this once, that you used to have like a pass first time guarantee?
Yes, pass first time or free lessons forever was the slogan. And it was ridiculously successful. I had people coming from London up to Little Blackburn to do lessons. But like I said, because I think it was around the same time, so it was that after that amazing year of 2014, my pass rate was, late 80s, early 90s%. So I thought, well, if it's going to attract so many learners because it's such a unique offer, and I'm only going to have one person in 10 fail, then it's worth it. It's worth the free lessons for the 1 out of the 10 people that fail. So that's why I did it, and it was ridiculously successful.
So what's your pass rate now? And not after a specific number, but as in, is it similar to what it was before? Has it changed?
No. It's probably about 65%, I think. It's probably a bit less now last year. I think it's gone down since I stopped being very test focused. And I think that, I used to have a lot of people that were really good at passing a test first time because I needed them to financially. But I weren't really concerned about what happened after that, where I think, because I'm a bit older now, I've kind of grown up, and I don't see the examiner as the devil like I used to. It was very much a us versus them kind of, on the test day. It was like, we're going to stick it to him and we're going to show him we can do it. And it was just rubbish, and it was very childish as well. And I do worry about the people that only pass because I used to take them to all the places in Blackburn where everyone failed, and I had like what I called a hotspot list. And about 2 weeks before the test, we'd drive around the hotspot list, and they would do the things that everyone does in them places that fails, but then not do it on the real test. So yeah, I think that really drove it up. It was very successful, but it was very test centered, and that's completely not what I'm about now. Since I got into coaching.
So, with those hotspots that you mentioned, did you find that you still go to those places now, but you don't take the same approach about them? So it's not, we're going here and because you might come in on your test, or do you find now you go in there more like, this is an area that's difficult to navigate, so we're going to go and learn this?
Yeah, I think I think the end of that really came from when I stopped planning the lesson and planning the routes. So now it's very much about, what do you want to work on? And then, if they've planned the lesson before, then I'll create like a provisional plan based on what they want to do and say, well, you said you wanted to work on this thing today. How about if we do this route? So it's very, the routes are very specific, not routes, but kind of, the practice area for the specific subject. Yeah. So yeah, it's probably less about that than it used to be. But I just used to think that I just was very test focused. That's all I cared about, and now I care about the person, and that's how it should be.
So, what would you say to the instructors listening to this that are that hear you say that your pass rate has gone down potentially, but you're almost celebrating that, not that specific thing, but you there'll be people that use that as a stick to beat coaching with. So with those people, how would you respond to that?
I'd say the kind of change between being instructor and being a coach hasn't affected the pass rate. It's other things as well, to be fair. Like I lived in Liverpool for 4 years, and the majority of my customers were foreign nationals, Chinese, Albanian. There was an Iranian guy that I taught to drive, and he didn't understand a word of English. And I used to have to put the lesson notes through the Google Albanian translator before I emailed him the notes at the end of the lesson. And everything was very visual, pointing and showing him diagrams. And we got through it. But I think when English isn't your first language, learning to drive is harder. So I think that our pass rate took a bit of a dive because of that. But I would say the end product, the person that's going for the test, is better now than they were. But on the day, they might not look as good because they've not done maybe all the hotspots in the area or, stuff like that. But I think the end product is a much more safety conscious person rather than someone that knows, because it was very forced, because it was, you must do this. If you want to pass first time, you have to do this and you have to do that. And you've got to go in second gear there and you've got to stop there. And it got them through the test. But what happened after that is my fear, and now I know, because of how I coach people now, that when they go on the road, they're going to be fine. And that makes me feel better inside.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.